Welcome to LexTalks, Legal Topics Simplified, your guide to navigating the world of law.
That's right.
Today, we're diving deep into a topic
Oh, this is a good one.
that's crucial for any Indian law student out there.
Absolutely.
Article 12 of the Indian Constitution.
You see, it's not about Article 12 being a fundamental right itself.
Right.
It's about defining what the state means when it comes to those rights being enforced.
So, who can you actually hold accountable
Exactly.
for upholding those rights?
Think of it like a legal chess game.
Okay.
You need to know who the players are
Right.
before you can make your moves.
I like that.
It's all about setting the stage
Okay.
for the whole drama.
Let's unpack this.
Yeah.
What does Article 12 actually say about who the state is?
Well, it starts off pretty straightforward.
Okay.
The text clearly states that the state includes the government and parliament of India,
Okay.
as well as the government and legislature
Got it.
of each state.
So far, so good. It's like the Constitution is laying out the main characters in our legal drama.
Exactly.
But I have a feeling there are more players to come.
Absolutely.
Right.
Article 12 doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
It also includes the phrase local or other authorities.
Local authorities.
And that's where
Yep.
things get really interesting.
Local authorities.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We all interact with them in our daily lives.
Everyday life.
But other authorities,
Yeah.
that sounds pretty mysterious.
You're right.
Like, who are we even talking about here?
It's a bit of a wild card.
Okay.
And over the years,
Yeah.
the courts have had to interpret what this phrase really means.
So it's been a bit of a struggle
A bit of a puzzle.
to figure it out.
They've gone beyond just looking at whether an entity was created by the government.
Okay.
They've focused on how that entity functions.
So it's not just about the origin story. It's about the actions,
The actions, the role they play.
the role they play.
That's right.
Now that's where the legal detective work comes in.
Absolutely.
So tell me, how do local authorities fit into this picture?
Think about the institutions you encounter every day.
Okay.
Municipalities, district boards, panchayats. These are the groups responsible for things like water supply, sanitation, local development.
Right, the ones who fix the potholes
Exactly.
and keep the streetlights on.
That's right.
Essential, but sometimes we take them for granted.
We do.
Right.
But Article 12 ensures
Okay.
that even these local authorities can't just ignore your fundamental rights.
They have to abide by those rights.
They are bound by the Constitution, just like the central government.
That's reassuring.
Yeah,
It means those fundamental rights are protected at every level,
exactly.
from the grand halls of Parliament
Yeah,
down to the local town hall.
absolutely.
But what about those mysterious other authorities? Do we have any real-world examples?
We certainly do.
Okay.
There are some landmark cases that every law student in India should know about.
I bet.
Let's start with the Rajasthan Electricity Board versus Mohan Law case.
Okay.
This case involved an electricity board,
Yeah.
which you might think of as a purely commercial entity.
Right. Not something you typically associate with
No,
fundamental rights
not at first glance.
like freedom of speech
Right.
or the right to equality.
But in this case,
Okay.
the court decided that even a commercial enterprise like an electricity board could be considered the state under Article 12.
Really?
The key factor.
What was it?
The board was acting on behalf of the government in providing an essential public service.
So the court looked beyond the label
Beyond the label.
of commercial enterprise
Exactly.
and focused on the actual function
That's right.
of the electricity board.
Precisely.
It's like saying, if you're walking like a duck and quacking like a duck, you're probably a duck, even if you call yourself a swan. I like that analogy.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah,
Are there any other cases
absolutely.
that really illustrate how broadly this definition can be applied?
Another landmark case
Okay.
is Sukhdev Singh versus Bhagatram.
Okay.
This one really shook things up.
How so?
It brought massive institutions like LIC, ONGC, and IFC under the umbrella of Article 12.
Wow, those are huge players in the Indian economy.
Huge.
That must have had a massive impact
It did.
on the scope of fundamental rights.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This case dramatically expanded
Wow.
the understanding of the state.
Right.
Suddenly, these powerful institutions,
Yeah.
even though they were technically private entities,
Right.
were held accountable
Okay.
for upholding fundamental rights.
So it's not enough
No.
to simply claim to be a private entity.
Exactly.
The court will look at your actions,
Your actions,
your relationship with the government,
your relationship with the government.
and the impact you have on people's rights.
It's a reminder that fundamental rights aren't just theoretical.
No, they're not.
They have real-world teeth,
They have teeth,
thanks to Article 12.
thanks to Article 12.
Wow.
And to make sense of this complex issue,
Yeah, it is complex.
the courts have developed tests
Yeah.
to determine whether a body falls under the definition of the state.
That makes sense.
One of the most well-known
Yeah.
is the 5-point test established in the R.D. Shetty v. Airport Authority of India case.
The 5-point
The
test.
5-point test.
It's like a checklist
It is.
for our legal detective.
A checklist for those legal detective.
So what are these 5 crucial points we need to consider?
Well, the first point focuses on the entity's funding.
Okay.
If it's primarily funded by the government,
Okay.
that's a strong indicator.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If the government is footing the bill, they're likely calling the shots, right?
Right.
What's the next point on our checklist?
The second point is about control.
Okay.
Does the government have significant control over the entity's actions and decisions?
So even if the funding isn't primarily from the government,
Right.
if they're pulling the strings behind the scenes,
That's what we're looking for.
that could be enough to qualify them as the state under Article 12.
Absolutely.
What else should our legal detectives be looking for?
The third point gets to the heart of what the entity does.
Okay.
Its function.
Its function.
Is it performing tasks that are typically associated with the government?
Things like providing essential services,
Yes.
regulating industries, or
Right.
even enforcing laws.
Those sound like government territory to me.
They
You're
do.
getting the hang of this.
Now, the fourth point looks at the history of the entity.
Yes.
Was it created by the government?
Was it created by the government?
Has it traditionally functioned as an arm of the government?
Exactly.
So we're digging into the entity's past,
The entity's past.
seeing if there's a precedent
Yeah.
for considering them the state.
A precedent.
So it's not just about what they're doing now,
It's more than that.
but where they came from.
Where they came from.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And what about the fifth and final point?
The fifth point.
What's the last piece of the puzzle?
Examines whether the entity enjoys any kind of monopoly power.
Okay.
If it's the sole provider of a particular service,
Right.
or holds a dominant position in a market,
Okay.
that could suggest it's acting as an extension of the state's authority.
So if there's no competition
If there's no competition,
and the entity is calling all the shots,
that's a red flag.
it's more likely to be seen as the state.
More likely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's amazing how these 5 points, taken together, can help us untangle this complex definition of the state.
It's a framework.
Yeah.
Yeah, analysis.
So we've got our main players,
Right.
the central and state governments,
The big players.
then our local authorities,
The local players.
and finally this fascinating category of other authorities
Yes.
that keeps expanding as the courts grapple with new scenarios.
It's an ever-evolving landscape.
But there's one player we haven't talked about yet,
Oh.
a very powerful player.
Who's that?
What about the judiciary itself?
The judiciary.
Can the courts be considered the state under Article 12?
That's a great question.
I mean, they are the ones interpreting the Constitution
Right.
and upholding those fundamental rights.
That's their role.
So can they be held accountable under Article 12?
That takes us right to the heart of a complex and fascinating debate within Indian constitutional law.
I can't wait to dive into that.
Me too.
But we'll save that for our next
This
segment.
sounds good.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
It's almost like a legal riddle.
It is a bit of a riddle.
Can the entity responsible for upholding fundamental rights
Right.
also be subject to those very rights?
It's a question that has puzzled legal minds
Yeah,
for decades.
I bet.
And as you delve deeper into your legal studies, you'll encounter a fascinating array of cases
I'm sure.
and arguments.
Okay, so walk me through it. Can you sue a court for violating your fundamental rights?
Well,
Or is that like suing the referee in the middle of a game?
it's a bit of both, actually.
Really?
The answer, as is often the case in law,
Yeah.
is it depends.
It depends.
The courts have had to draw a line
Okay.
between the judicial functions of a court
Okay.
and its non-judicial functions.
Okay, so there are different types of activities
types.
going on within the judiciary.
Yes.
That makes sense.
It's a crucial distinction.
Tell me more about this distinction.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Judicial functions are the core of what courts do.
Got it.
It's about deciding cases,
Okay.
interpreting the law,
Okay.
delivering judgments.
So like the classic image of a judge in a courtroom,
Exactly.
gavel in hand, making rulings.
That's it.
So the very essence of the
Would
judiciary.
be S.
And those functions wouldn't typically
No.
be subject to fundamental rights claims.
Generally, no.
Okay.
The courts have held that their judicial decisions made within their jurisdiction are not acts of the state in the context of fundamental rights.
So they have kind of immunity in that sense.
You could say that.
Okay.
Think about it. If every judicial decision could be challenged
Right.
on the grounds of fundamental rights,
Oh, that would be chaos.
it would create chaos in
Yeah.
the legal system.
It would be like appealing every umpire's call in a cricket match.
They're like that.
The game would never end.
Exactly.
So where do those non-judicial functions come in?
Non-judicial functions are those activities that go beyond the core task of deciding cases.
Okay.
Think about administrative decisions, rulemaking for the court's own procedures, or managing court staff.
So it's the behind-the-scenes work,
The behind-the-scenes work.
the administrative machinery that keeps the judiciary running smoothly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in these non-judicial roles, the courts have been more willing to be considered the state under Article 12, making them potentially accountable for fundamental rights violations.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to see the distinction here.
Yeah.
You might not be able to sue a court for its ruling in your case.
Right.
But you could potentially challenge
You could.
an administrative decision they made
That's right.
that affected your rights.
Precisely.
That's a really helpful example.
Yeah.
It highlights that even the judiciary isn't above the law
Not above the law.
when it comes to certain types of actions.
Ooh, that's the key.
Now, you mentioned that there are some key cases
Oh, yeah.
that have grappled with this very issue.
There are.
I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear about those.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Let's dive in.
tell us about those.
One case that stands out
Okay.
is Naresh Sridhar Murajkar. This case involved the power of the High Court
Okay.
to make rules for its own functioning.
Interesting.
The question was whether these rules could be challenged on the grounds that they violated fundamental rights.
So the court was making rules for itself.
Making rules for itself.
And someone argued that those rules
Exactly.
were infringing on their rights.
That's the issue. The Supreme Court, in this case,
Okay.
recognized the distinction we've been discussing.
Okay.
They held that while the High Court has the power to make rules for itself,
Good.
those rules cannot violate fundamental rights.
So even the court's own rule book
Even the rule book
has to comply with the Constitution.
has to comply.
That's a powerful check on their authority.
It is a check.
Another important case to remember
Yes.
is A.R. Anchele.
A.R. Anchele.
This case involved the appointment of a judge.
That's right.
The question was whether this appointment process,
Yes.
which had some irregularities,
Some irregularities.
could be challenged under Article 12.
That was the question before the court.
So this case delves into the very heart
The heart of the matter.
of how judges are chosen.
How judges are chosen.
Did the court find that this appointment process could be challenged?
They did.
On fundamental rights grounds.
They did.
Wow.
The court held that while the appointment of judges
Yeah.
is a critical function,
Right.
it still needs to be done in a way
Okay.
that respects fundamental rights.
Okay.
They emphasize that transparency and fairness
Okay.
are essential in this process.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Even the process of selecting who gets to interpret the Constitution
Right.
has to adhere to the Constitution itself.
It's a fundamental principle.
It's a reminder that nobody, not even judges, are above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
And there's another case,
Yes.
Rupa Ashokara,
Rupada Shokara.
that delves into the issue of contempt of court.
A very important issue.
The question here was whether the power to punish for contempt,
Right.
a crucial power of the judiciary,
A crucial power.
could be exercised in a way that violated fundamental rights.
That's the question.
Contempt of court.
Yes.
That's a serious matter.
It is a serious matter.
It's about maintaining the dignity and authority of the courts, right?
The dignity and authority.
But it also has the potential to clash
It does.
with rights like freedom of speech.
a potential clash.
Yeah.
The court in Rupa Ashok Hara acknowledged
Okay.
that the power to punish for contempt is essential,
Yeah.
but emphasized that it must be exercised within the bounds of fundamental rights. They stressed that courts must be careful not to stifle legitimate criticism or dissent in the name of maintaining order.
So it's a delicate balance.
It's a delicate balance between maintaining order and protecting freedom of speech.
These cases really highlight the delicate balance that the courts have to strike.
That's right.
On the one hand, they need to uphold the Constitution. And protect fundamental rights.
Protect those rights.
On the other hand, they need to function effectively as an institution.
They do.
Which sometimes requires making administrative decisions.
Making those decisions.
Or exercising powers. Like contempt.
That's part of their function.
It's a constant negotiation, a dynamic process.
It is dynamic.
And as you study these cases and others like them, you'll start to appreciate the nuances of this debate.
The nuance.
And the complexities of Article 12.
The complexities.
So we've gone from the government and parliament. To local authorities. To a vast array of other authorities. And now even the judiciary itself. Has come under the microscope of Article 12.
Under the microscope.
It's amazing to see how this seemingly straightforward definition has become a tool.
It's a tool.
For examining the actions. Of so many different entities. It's almost like Article 12 is this constantly evolving organism.
It really is.
Adapting to new challenges. And pushing the boundaries. Of what the state really means.
A living document, you could say.
You know, for our listeners who are just starting their legal journey, this deep dive into Article 12 might seem a bit abstract.
A little bit.
But I think it's crucial
to
understand why this seemingly dry definition is actually so important in the real world.
It's not just theoretical.
No, not at all.
This stuff has real-world implications.
It has real teeth.
It does.
Think about it. Land acquisition disputes.
Land acquisition, that's a big one.
Where individuals are fighting powerful entities that might be claiming to be private.
Trying to hide behind that label.
But are actually acting on behalf of the government.
Exactly.
Or employment issues.
Employment.
Where someone might be facing discrimination. From an institution that receives government funding. Or enjoys a monopoly in a particular sector.
A classic Article 12 scenario.
Even access to essential services. Like healthcare. Or education. Can be challenged under Article 12.
Absolutely.
If those services are being denied or provided unfairly by an entity that falls into the definition of the state.
The state is a broad category.
So for all you aspiring lawyers out there, this isn't just about memorizing definitions for your exam. This is about understanding how the law can be used to fight for justice.
To fight for justice.
To protect the rights of the vulnerable.
Protecting the vulnerable.
And to ensure that even the most powerful entities are held to the standards of the Constitution.
Accountability.
And remember, the conversation about Article 12 is ongoing.
It's ongoing.
As our society evolves.
New technologies emerge.
New
challenges arise.
The
courts will continue to grapple.
They'll keep grappling.
With the meaning of this crucial article.
What if, for example, a private company develops a powerful AI system?
AI, now that's interesting.
That's used by the government for surveillance. Or law enforcement. Could that company be considered the state under Article 12?
Now that's a question for the future. That's the kind of question that'll keep legal minds busy.
It's a fascinating question.
It is fascinating.
So keep those legal minds sharp.
Stay sharp.
Stay curious.
And
never stop exploring the nuances of Indian constitutional law.
It's an ever-evolving field.
Because understanding Article 12 is not just about knowing the law.
It's about more than that.
It's about understanding the power dynamics of our society. And the tools we have to ensure that justice prevails.
The tools for justice.
That's our deep dive into Article 12 for today.
That's it for today.
Thank you for listening to LexTalks.
Thanks for listening.
Follow, subscribe.
Follow and subscribe.
And stay notified for future episodes.
We'll see you next time.